Welcome to Speaking of Entrepreneurship, a podcast powered by the Center for Entrepreneurs at Cuyahoga Community College's Corporate College. Here, we dive into real conversations with industry experts, innovative founders, and business leaders who share their insights, challenges, and strategies for success. Whether you're launching a startup, scaling your business, or just exploring the entrepreneurial mindset, this is your space to learn, adapt, and thrive.
Hello, Dan. It's good to have you here. Dan Hampu today from Burton D Morgan Foundation. Welcome, and I'm glad you're with us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Dr. Baston.
You know, I want to jump right into it because you have such an interesting story to tell. And for some entrepreneurs who may not be familiar with the Burton D Morgan Foundation, how would you describe your mission and the kind of impact that you aim to create for the entrepreneurial community?
Sure. So our founder, Burt Morgan, was an entrepreneur in the early 50s, had some really unique ideas, most of them centered around his experience in corporate America. So he got hooked on pressure-sensitive adhesives. So think sticky paper. He did some early technological innovation on small Band-Aids for Johnson & Johnson, started a couple of companies, invested in a couple of companies, and from those successes started our foundation, the Burton D Morgan Foundation. We're a private foundation in Hudson, Ohio, and our grant making and programmatic support goes to furthering entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter where an entrepreneur comes from. We want to see entrepreneurs growing in their development, ultimately reaching the successes that we think they deserve and helping them along the way. And the second thing that he really cared about was doing efforts to really strengthen and preserve the free enterprise system because he thought it was America's #1 advantage. And he was an entrepreneur who benefited from living in an environment and a community that had the free enterprise system at its back.
I love that. And you're actually in a new strategic plan, right? Your new strategic plan runs through 2026. So what's the biggest shift in the direction that's occurred with this latest plan?
It's a great question. When I joined, we previously had operated under the age of the entrepreneur as the focal point for our grant making. So previously it was looking at, were you a young person, were you in college, or were you an adult? And then we were working with grantees and partners that did work for those different communities. When I joined, we looked at who we were serving and we decided to flip the lens from looking at the age of the entrepreneur to looking at the stage of the entrepreneur. So are you ideation and skill building? Are you at the precipice of start, or are you generating a little bit of revenue? Or are you what's called a second stage company, which is a subset of a small business, 1 to 50 million in revenue. So one of the big changes from our strategic plan was to shift from age to stage. The second part of that was to put a little bit of emphasis on those who are practicing entrepreneurs. So we still do our work with what would have been our youth bucket, but now through the ideation and skill building. And now we put a little bit more emphasis, even more emphasis on the startups who have started to raise dollars and actually are generating some revenue, and those who are making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, a few $1 million and are looking for educational opportunities to advance as leaders.
I love that. I just think that it's so important for people to have the opportunity and the idea that it's not age determinative, but stage determinative. Yeah. I think that is a very breakthrough concept.
We've found that the stage of the entrepreneur is one way where entrepreneurs are dealing with similar problems. So if you're in an ideation phase, you're dealing with similar problems and you have to get over those problems. If you are generating a little bit of revenue, it, again, tends to be a similar clump of problems. And then the next phase, the second phase, those obstacles are oftentimes the same bucket or very similar. It's never the same for any business owner as you're navigating the roller coaster, but at least the categories tend to be pretty similar.
Yeah, this idea that if you can't manage $30 well, you certainly can't manage $3,000 well. But if you can manage the $3,000 well, over time, you can get to managing $3 million well and understanding the basics that ultimately will get us there. Now, I do know that you don't fund entrepreneurs directly, and you make grants to nonprofit partners. So can you explain what that means and why you fund the ecosystem?
Yeah.
And why this approach is important to you?
Absolutely. So we've valued the partnership with Tri-C as it relates to being one of the ecosystem partners that works to develop entrepreneurs in their entire journey from start to potentially finish, and wrapping that around it with services that help educate, mentor, provide them peer-to-peer learning opportunities. We also work with a myriad of different organizations on stuff like something called Morgan Startup Grants, where Tri-C is a recipient of that, where we don't have the connections to the entrepreneurs in all situations. We don't live, breathe, and work in all of the different communities. So it's important to work with grantee partners who know their communities and who are close with the entrepreneurs who they could be serving, and trust that they have a good understanding of what's needed in their community. And that Morgan Startup Grants is just one type of example of an initiative that we work with grantee partners who then do a good job of working with students in some situations or business owners who might need just a little bit of capital to get over a pretty important obstacle. And again, wrap it around with some services, some mentoring, some additional educational opportunities, and hopefully that really takes them from being able to manage $30 to $3,000 to $3 million and so on. So it's really important. And we're actually hosting we're going to be here for an event this evening called Rooted and Rising.
And Rising. I love it.
Which is an opportunity for the community to get together and talk about their experiences, some of which overlapping with that Morgan Startup Grants program. But just in general, how can we put the community together and allow them to support one another?
I see you all as like a ecosystem amplifier. Like you all are really trying to amplify opportunity, make the appropriate connections, seed the future. And it really is inspiring because there are so many people with a dream, so many people who have a hope, a desire. They may not necessarily know exactly what they want to do, but they do know that if they bet on themselves and the ideas that they have, and they get focused and get the support, that they can actually rise. So I just love this idea of rooted and rising.
And what's needed before rooting? Planting a seed.
Planting a seed.
Like
well, I often talk about, particularly with different groups, everyone is looking for the harvest, but they must remember that the power was in the seed. And while placed in the ground, compacted in a dark place at times, trampled over in some circumstances, but it is through that experience of the watering and the fertilizing. Sometimes that fertilizing really is, rough, but that process is what produces harvest in people's lives.
Couldn't have said it better. And maybe it's not the first seed. Maybe it's not your first crop, which we've experienced with entrepreneurs. Oftentimes have to try again. And it's not always in the same industry. But you take those learnings, you take what you've planted, and you continue to grow from that.
And you think about Barry Gordy. I always use Barry Gordy as the example of somebody who was working in Ford Motor Company, had some failed businesses, but used what he learned in the assembly line to actually take young people who had a song in their heart and some grit in their voice and actually created the Motown sound that was the soundtrack of America. So it is this idea of having something that someone sees something in that advances the hopes and dreams. And so when you think about the trends today, what trends are you seeing among your partner organizations? Anything new in how they're serving entrepreneurs to help build this community?
I think one of the things, and it relates to the program this evening, is just the collaboration that's taking place. Having partners that are in the room together with one another and working with entrepreneurs that may or may not be in their community and sharing the experience with one another. We had a board meeting last week and had a couple of entrepreneurs come talk with the board. And one of the astonishing things was there were student entrepreneurs that were benefiting from other campuses in Northeast Ohio that weren't too far from where they were going to school or where they lived. But those types of collaborations are really important. I think it's a theme of what we've seen, and kind of cross-sharing, sharing the knowledge between partners, and understanding what are entrepreneurs in different communities going through.
Particularly at a time where sort of there's so much change and so many things that are happening nationally, internationally, the need to collaborate is probably at the highest level we've seen in quite some time. And Northeast Ohio has a growing network of entrepreneur hubs. So how do you help these organizations collaborate instead of compete?
Yeah, I think recognizing that there are differences in strengths. And so trying to lean in on what are the strengths of different partners, and really supporting that. So if an entrepreneurial hub focuses on tech and a specific part of tech, encourage them to really lean into that. And then if other partners they bump into an entrepreneur who needs that type of support, not try to recreate a wheel per se, lean into the other support organization's ability to serve that type of entrepreneur.
I love that because once again, we're stronger together, better together, more productive together. And when we can support each other, that makes a huge difference as well. And so when you think about what kind of measurable impact do you hope entrepreneurs will feel as a result of your strategic priorities in terms of going into the way in which you've rethought funding? Do you think they'll have better access to funding, stronger mentorships, more robust networks? What are the kind of things that you think are going to be the game changers or accelerators because of the new program, your approach?
Yeah, we're seeing connections between entrepreneurs really catalyze, and some really cool things come about from facilitating peer-to-peer opportunities and this blending of different program partners and different types of entrepreneurs. So it's been really rewarding to see not only on business growth as one key indicator, but also just personally to see people getting through obstacles that you don't necessarily think about in a 9-to-5 job or another job. I mentor a couple of entrepreneurs, and I always tell them, entrepreneurship's a full contact sport. Not that other jobs aren't, but entrepreneurship is. And so you have to have this community. You have to have some people that understand what you're going through, and you need to be able to rely on them to support you and the partners that they work with to support you getting through the obstacles. On the business side and on the learning side, anything and everything to help with driving revenue growth, startup capital received, whether that's loans, grants, or investment. But seeing if there's any revenue, all things relating to revenue, job growth, startup capital, lending, grant making, things that show growth in the startup community and in the small business community.
I love that because so many people don't always know how to sort of get access, and some are just going it alone. But if they can come into a hub, a network that is supported by organizations like yours, you're not just supporting the connectors, but you're supporting connection.
Yeah,
which is, I think, an even greater contribution.
And the one thing that we have been doing that's on the earlier continuum is we have this really awesome platform that's for K through 12 educators to connect with entrepreneurs who provide curriculum or games or kits or things for young people to develop entrepreneur skills, innovation, creativity, problem solving. And it's this perfect amalgamation of a K through 12 educator with that entrepreneur and that type of curriculum, funded by whether it's us or another organization, but then getting them into the room and then getting the students who are ultimately the beneficiary out into the community to go to the business owner's place, see what it's like to start a business, see what it's like to run a business, and then apply some of the principles from the practical thing that they've got in the classroom in that business setting. It's really a cool program. It's called the Yippee Exchange platform. Really interesting.
Yippee. Come on. Yippee. I love it.
And we got pens that spin, and we let out yippies all the time when things go well.
Well, we want more yippies all around.
Yes.
All around. Now, as you look toward 2026, what new opportunities or programs might entrepreneurs start to see emerging through your partner organizations?
Some of the things that we're seeing, and I think it's not just reflective of the time, but we're interested in furthering the support of the whole entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. So it's not yet something that's in a plan or a targeted thing per se, but the mental and emotional well-being of an entrepreneur, ensuring that they have the support that they need. Because as you start to employ people, I mean, you know how important it is to be a leader, and if you are not in a good space, that has a trickle-down effect on the people that you work with and that you work for. And so it's really important to try to figure out, are there things that we can do to further support entrepreneurs, their mental, emotional well-being? There's plenty of statistics out there that speak to just how hard it is, and just how the statistics speak to depression, anxiety, drug, alcohol, those types of statistics. And this is just one of those things that I could see being something that we lean more into, and it's all about the peer-to-peer learning. AI is not going away. So additional program, additional thought around how does artificial intelligence impact various businesses. It's having impact already on all sorts of different businesses, and allowing space for entrepreneurs to kind of share what they're doing and how they're solving problems with AI is, I think, going to be something that's continue to be around. And then another one that's succession planning or transition planning. As the current wave of owners think about what's next, as they approach retirement or as they approach transitioning out of the business, it's not always clear what is the next step. So understanding, are there things that could be put in place to support entrepreneurs in that journey?
Yeah, just think about the fact that sometimes you may have children, but they may not have an interest in the business that you have built. So what happens? How do we ensure that those time-honored traditions are passed down with someone else who may also have an entrepreneurial spirit? So, I know a lot about the entrepreneurship through acquisition efforts that are underway all across the country today, so that family businesses might not be run by the family anymore, but that they're still continuing to benefit future generations of real change makers. And you just never know the continued innovation that comes through an entrepreneur. Is that entrepreneur brings to the conversation a whole different set of sort of ideas and hopes and dreams and aspirations, and can identify the spaces and places where we might tweak something, we might make something better, we might do something a little bit differently. So I think the work that you do in art truly enabling people to have those hopes and dreams and actually see them come to pass. So it's just very exciting.
And there's it has a big impact on the community, because if someone isn't available to take over for the business, what will happen to the community that is impacted by that business's presence, and the workforce that is impacted by that business, and the pipelines between various institutions and businesses like that, if they're no longer around or if they're shrinking because of whatever the reason. But again, just trying to steward and be a part of serving, if there's a way to serve, the educational process around what can you do to the transition if it's not a family member who's taking over a business.
Burton D. Morgan Foundation. Fantastic. What excites you most about the entrepreneurial landscape in Northeast Ohio right now, and where do you see the biggest room for growth?
There's a really, our community is tight, and I think it's only getting tighter. I mean, I think there's some opportunities to continue to bridge gaps between the types of entrepreneurship and blending small business and startup community even more. But it's very tight, and you see evidence of that with the amount of activity going on in Cleveland, in Akron, around the startup events. I know this week as we sit here, the Bounce Innovation Hub is going to have its startup showcase. We're having our Rooted and Rising conversation this evening. Last week was Cleveland Tech Week, where there was a bunch of activities happening, and Jumpstart's Venture Capital Fest was one of the activities. There are a lot of things that are going on, and I feel like collaboration is strong. There's some new funding vehicles, venture capital funding vehicles that are available, but always developing more ways for entrepreneurs to get access to capital so that they can get over the obstacles that are in front of them, or grow their teams in competition with not just Northeast Ohio, but the rest of the globe, because the scale of capital that's required to grow quickly if that's your desired path is big. And so knowing we have those resources here, but understanding there's connection points to other parts of the world where you can get additional capital to grow your business to be competitive on a global landscape, I think is still something that we can continue to improve.
Dan Hampu from Burton D. Morgan Foundation, doing extraordinary work, making sure that people have the opportunity to design their destiny by entrepreneurship. You are an amazing, amazing foundation. And I thank you on behalf of so many folks in Northeast Ohio who are trying to help people realize their dreams. Thanks for being with me today, and I really appreciate having you.
You bet, and thanks for having me, and thanks for all the hard work that you do. That's integral to our community.
Thanks so much. Take care now.
You too.
Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast, brought to you by the Center for Entrepreneurs at Corporate College. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share with fellow entrepreneurs. Tune back in to stay connected with us for more insights and resources to help you build, innovate, and thrive.